Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, we're going to be chatting with Sia from Seedcamp to hear a little bit about the firm, what they look for in investing, and their portfolio companies. So, Sia, thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot for having me. It's a real pleasure, and we have quite a few of our portfolio companies that were actually working from Tech Hub. I think we also had companies that we sourced from Tech Hub. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to do this.
Oh, that's really great to hear. Yeah, that's nice. So a little bit of background about Seedcamp. When was the fund started?
So Seedcamp was started back in 2007, and obviously the whole ecosystem in Europe back then looked very, very different. And Seedcamp has evolved quite a bit over the past 13 years, but the mission has very much stayed the same. So it's very much like finding all across Europe the most ambitious entrepreneurs and backing them with that first check.
Do you have, I guess, how do you define ambitious?
I think it's very much around like how hungry they are to really like scale their business big time and really like kind of think beyond also their like national borders and really think about like being a leader in like the space, a sector they operate. So that's like the way we think about it.
Okay. Do you have a certain sector that you invest in?
So we're very much a generalist software investor. I think over time, we say like we have more of a kind of like bottom-up approach when it comes to like the sourcing. And so we have the chance to see a lot of deal flow every year. So we get like thousands of companies that will reach out to us through our website and like fill the form that is available there. And what is really interesting, given the fact that we invest so early, is that we can almost like look at this deal flow we get through our website and like identify sometimes very, very early new trends. And sometimes you start to see like that there are like really strong founders that are like all like going after a certain type of opportunities, building businesses around specific business models, etc. And that's much more the way we operate rather than like a top-down approach of saying those are like the 2 or 3 topics that we are really interested in. But over time, obviously, those like trends that build the portfolio have evolved, and I think we've been very active in fintech all over the past 13 years. But for example, more recently, we've done also quite a bit in digital health. But basically, if you're building a software business, you should consider Seedcamp because we are very much having a generalist approach and are very keen to hear about like basically founders that are building interesting tech companies and who have really that ambition of like building a global leader.
Actually, on that topic of trends and looking at the applications to see where you're going to invest, have you seen any trends recently?
So I think it's still a bit early to like look at like trends that are very much like impacted by COVID. I think we'll probably see founders that are launching businesses just like right now and like who made that kind of like jump to like really like the entrepreneurial journey pitch to us a few months from now, and that's going to be really interesting. We're actually really curious about that. But I think over the past 2-3 years, if we look at the portfolio of the current fund, there were already like some trends around like enterprise collaboration, just like enabling remote work, etc., that we had already started to invest in, and obviously those will only be strengthened now given the circumstances. Then I think the same way as I was mentioning, some of the same like dynamics we've seen in the financial sector, we start to see them a bit around health, and I think that's been pretty exciting for us. So entrepreneurs taking a much more, let's say, consumer or patient-centric approach when it comes to like building digital health solutions, and you've seen a lot of like activity in like, let's say, like more like preventive health solutions, and also now I think there are like really interesting dynamics when you're also like trying to sell to like the health systems, because obviously given the current circumstances,
Yeah.
the health system has shown some of its limits, and like I think we've seen over the past few weeks just companies being able to like close partnerships or close contracts with the NHS that would have like taken much longer before like the lockdown. So that's been definitely also an area where we've seen a lot of interesting innovations.
And what stage are the companies usually at that you invest?
So to be honest, I mean, we like to say that, that there's nothing too early for us. We would very much like to engage when like founders like already like maybe came together as a team and have a clear vision for what they want to build, and they might have some very early proof points that indeed that there is like some interest for like the product that they are going to ship, but I would say it's also a bit like case by case, because we had like investments we've made in companies that are pretty deep tech, where literally at the time we backed the business, they were like still like 6-10 months away from having a product that they could go out and sell. And on the other side, we had sometimes consumer startups that came to us with already some traction, not like huge numbers, but where you could already see that on like the kind of like early traction they had, like in terms of engagement, in terms of like level of interest from the community, something special was happening. But we like to say, as soon as you have a clear vision, you have a team in place, it's worth reaching out to us. And if it's too early, we will let you know, basically. But we invest very, very early.
What's your usual check size?
So we have 2 entry points. We are right now investing out of our 4th fund. It's a 60 million pound fund. And we also keep half of the capital for follow-on investments to be able to like back the companies on their subsequent rounds. But when it comes to the initial investments, we have our pre-seed strategy and our seed strategy. And by pre-seed, because I think each VC has like a slightly different definition of what is pre-seed, what is seed. Pre-seed for us is very much related to like the size of the round and like the kind of like process we run. So when it comes to pre-seed, we are very much in the driving seat. We are looking at leading small rounds that would be anywhere from just like the 150, 200,000 pounds that we invest up to potentially 500,000-600,000. And we would act as the lead investor. We have a very structured process there, where basically it starts with like going on our website, submitting that form, and then on the back of that, there are like phone interviews, and then in-person stage where we would like on the back of that decide if we want to move forward with an investment or not. And we can also facilitate, if the company is looking for more than just like the Seedcamp check at pre-seed, we can facilitate that syndication process by connecting them to some of our investors in our fund who are also keen to invest alongside us in those pre-seed opportunities, and also just in our broader network. And then when it comes to the seed investments, there we are investing slightly bigger amounts. So if pre-seed is 150 to like 200,000 right now, at seed we would invest anything from like 200 up to like 500,000 pounds. And there we are not the lead investor. So we would invest alongside another early stage fund that would lead that kind of like 1.5, 2 million round. And we would come often as the second largest check, where because we have smaller ownership targets, we only look at seed for 5% and at pre-seed for like 6-7%. It means that we are in a position where we can be very collaborative with other investors.
And I want to touch quickly on carry-on rounds that you mentioned. When you have an investment that is going, let's say you back them at seed level and now they're going for their Series A or Series B, but maybe they're not yet profitable and the numbers are a bit fuzzy. How do you decide whether or not to like cut your losses or to give them that additional funding?
So I think, it's a really good question. The way we approach follow-on is that basically we tried our best at every stage to really like think ahead of time what's the right amount for the company to raise, and really help them with anything like being like just like the material and then like, you know, like their like financial model, and also like the actual pitch, the storytelling, etc. To then, so of course, like introductions to like some of the top investors out there. We are looking at, when we are doing follow-ons, at very much like preserving our ownership stake. It's not a strategy of trying to double down and increase that ownership stake. So when we invest initially in companies, they know that they will be able to like count on Seedcamp like following on in like the next 2 or 3 rounds, and that Seedcamp will look at doing its pro rata, and then we really try to work hard on like making those rounds happen. And we've been like historically pretty successful at that. And in some scenarios where unfortunately it's maybe like too early, like the company needs to like raise a bit more money from internal investors before like going out and like raising a bigger round. If we feel that it's like required for the business to like raise a bit of cash to extend their runway, we can also chip in those cases. But we're very much like trying to like have like external validation on those next rounds. And if that's not the case, we would look at what is like this kind of like minimum amount that would allow the business to like reach the milestones that would unlock the larger external round.
Okay, thanks. I want to circle back to what you said about backing ambitious entrepreneurs. What does that sort of like first couple conversations look at, and what kind of tells are you using to decide whether or not this is someone that you would want to invest in?
Yeah, I think we like to say we are not investing at product market fit, because when we come in, all the businesses are pre-product market fit, but at founder market fit, that's what we are looking for. And so when entrepreneurs are like pitching us, I think it's very important that they clearly show why them as a team have an edge to go after this opportunity. And that edge can manifest itself in like very different ways. You know, sometimes it's a technical edge. It's a very, very hard problem, and it's a team that has because of its background from academia or like from like their work experience, like really a unique opportunity to tackle that problem. Sometimes it's extremely strong sector expertise that they bring. Sometimes it's also just like extremely like mission driven founders. So founders who maybe in their personal life have experienced a problem, and they really are like keen to go after and commit the next like 5-10 years of their life to like solving that challenge. So that's like very much what we try to look for early on. And it's obviously more of an art than a science. I think that the chance we have is that we are able to see that across a lot of companies, and to surface the one that are like extremely like strong at demonstrating that like founder market fit.
Okay. And I've seen a lot on your website and a lot of your content that you're really focused on startups who are focused on global expansion. I was going to ask if you expect that the startups have already scaled internationally, but based on what you've said, it sounds like no.
No, definitely not.
Okay. And so, but you are interested to hear whether or not that's something that they have in mind for their future.
Yeah, so I think we get really excited about companies that are going after large established markets where there are opportunities for them to really like build a product that has an edge, not just on the local and national level, but on a global scale. And it doesn't mean that you need to immediately like go and have an international strategy. Obviously, like the first like 12 months, 18 months might be, depending on the nature of the business, more focused on like your local market. But we want very much the teams we back to have as part of like their plans to really like build something that is clearly differentiated on a global level, and that has like this potential as soon as like they maybe raise their larger seed round or even their Series A, to then like start to think about internationalization.
Okay. And the last question I have for you is on the topic of valuation. A lot of
Mm.
the investors that we've been chatting with through this interview series, we've been hearing different feedback. Some people saying valuation really matters. Other people saying valuation, we don't even look at what startups put at their valuation for their seed round. So where do you fall on that spectrum?
I think, yeah, when we are advising, our companies that go out like fundraise, the advice is always very much that they shouldn't go out and like say that's the price tag, that's the valuation of the business. I don't think that's the way it works when you're like raising early stage funding. I think it's very much about like approaching like the fundraise with an open mind and thinking about, okay, what's like the range that we could raise? Is it like 1 to 1.5 mil? Is it like 200 to 400k? And basically often like the advice would be to start towards like the lower end of the range, and if you start to build momentum in the raise, you can like start to like think about raising more money. And if an investor is asking you about your valuation expectations, I think the good answer is often to say that you're not greedy, you're not here to like solely optimize around ownership because you want to really build this into a huge business, but that you're also aware of like market standards, and that, for example, if you're like raising a 1.5 million round, that you will be comfortable with 20% dilution, and I think like it's often an output, like the valuation of like the amount you're raising. And so if you're able to anchor the conversation around a percentage of dilution that you're comfortable with, it also means that if you get a lot of momentum in your fundraising conversation, you can always go back and say, hey, I never said that we would raise at that specific valuation. We always spoke about like a percentage of dilution. And now I think I can raise, I don't know, like 2 million instead of 1.3, 1.4. So I want to raise that 2 million for the same dilution. So I think that's like kind of like the smart way to approach it for founders.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And now I'm going to pass you over to Purdy.
So we're going to talk a little bit about your portfolio companies. And I guess like in contrast to the conversation that you were just having about figuring out how a founder was a good fit for Seedcamp, I guess the question comes the other way as well. So there's a bunch of VCs out there, there's a bunch of different kind of routes to finance out there. And it will also be founders that are evaluating which is the best fit for them in terms of what VC fund can help them with what they're doing. So we know that you offer loads of support for your portfolio companies. So can you talk a little bit about actually some of the portfolio companies that people might have heard of, firstly, and then what kind of support you give them, so how you support founders when you give them investment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of like some of the most known companies, I guess, the ones that come to mind are the likes of like Revolut, TransferWise, or UiPath, where we were first investor. I think like the support, I mean, obviously has evolved quite a lot over the years, because I think it's just the needs of founders in Europe that have also evolved a lot. And in the early days, it was maybe a bit more like kind of like, startup building 101, and like a lot of advice, even on like not getting screwed by like your investors, and like just like doing a lot of work around like setting some of like the just like standards around like founder friendly terms and those things that we were doing. And over time, this has evolved, because so the founders we see today are often like much more experienced about like startup building, and there's also so much content that is just available out there. But I think when it comes to our approach to support and what differentiates us also a bit from other firms, that we are like taking very much a network-driven approach to everything we do, and that's also very true when it comes to the support. And because we invest in more companies than most other funds, and we've done that for longer than a lot of like the early stage players in Europe, we have this really large portfolio of companies of now like over 350 businesses that for some of them are still very early stage, others have scaled. And we try to do a lot to like bring those companies together, to bring like their functional lead together, and just enable the knowledge sharing across those people. And so it will not be, you know, a kind of like one size fits all approach. Like for each companies, they might like kind of benefit from like different stuff that we provide, and sometimes like they would even be like as founders like the expert around a specific topic, and we would even leverage them to like share their expertise with like the rest of the portfolio. But basically we organize a lot of office hours with either our core team members, because in the core team we also have like functional experts around marketing, enterprise sales, also talent management and people, product UI, UX, etc. So those are like experts in-house who can help companies around those core areas and really show them what is like kind of like best practice at that stage of their business, and how they should like think about it. We don't really do the job on behalf of like the startups. It's very much like kind of like showing them how to approach the problem, what we've learned from also our experience with other businesses, and then like trying to provide them the right tools to like then execute. And there's like, so that like functional expertise, but also a lot that we do around like summits, for example, for the functional leads, bringing them together, a lot of workshops. So for example, over the past few weeks, we've done a lot around even like some of those like COVID related topics, you know, from like furlough to like some of like the schemes of the government, like the future fund, etc. A lot of like kind of sessions to just like allow our founders to like also ask questions to experts in those fields. And then I think obviously for us, it comes a lot down to like also helping the companies raise like follow-on funding and being successful at like raising it from the top investors out there. So that means obviously some of like the top investors in Europe, but also increasingly on a global scale. We've seen over the past year and a half, a lot of like US investors being very keen to invest also here. And it's been 10 years that we've been building those ties to those firms in the US. So they often like come to us when they're looking for deal flow in Europe, and that has been really helpful for our companies too.
That's really interesting that you say that, because that was essentially my next question, which is when your portfolio companies are looking to expand internationally, how can you support them with that? And that there's the kind of investment piece. So yeah, if by using you they can get introduced to investors in the US, for example, if they're looking to scale over there, but also if there's anything that's like changes in policies or regulations. So especially with fintechs like Revolut and stuff, if they're trying to operate in a new market, is there any kind of support that you, connections or something that you help them with when it comes to that?
So when it comes to regulation, I mean, one of the chances we have is that one of my partners, Tom, is an ex-lawyer, so he's been able to like sometimes help companies with his legal expertise. But I think very much like the way we operate is that we are not pretending to be on top of like every regulations out there, etc. But what we can do again for our network is connect our founders to either other founders in the portfolio or even experts, mentors who have dealt with that specific challenge. And yeah, because of the size of the network, that has been a pretty effective way to support the portfolio. But also we have like a close relationship with a lot of like the key service providers. So when it comes to like specific like regulatory questions, etc. Sometimes it's an introduction to someone we know at the government. Sometimes it's an introduction to a top law firm that has strong expertise around that specific area that would like really like kind of be able to help the business. So that's very much the way we operate.
Yeah, that makes sense.